Welcome to Jefferson Highlights Community Television. I'm Lori Zook. My guest today is Joanne Pierce from the Division of Youth and Family Services, here to talk about DYFS and their volunteer program. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with me.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about what is DYFS and what is your role there?
DYFS is the state child abuse prevention program, and my role is that I coordinate the internship program for the northern part of the state. Within the region, we have an office in each county, and I cover the areas of Sussex, Morris, Warren, Bergen, Passaic, and Hudson. I was a caseworker for a number of years in the Sussex office, and after 18 plus years, I decided to do some recruiting for the internship program, and it's worked out really very nicely. The interns are people that get credit, students that can get credit for their volunteer work in the offices. And it's great because the things that maybe the caseworker doesn't get a chance to do, maybe the extra supportive services or the hooking up with services to the families that we work with, is an added bonus.
Okay, can you tell me what is abuse and neglect, and maybe you can give some examples?
Sure. Well, it's very difficult. In New Jersey, if you bruise your child, even if disciplining them, it is considered excessive and is therefore physical abuse. The division looks into matters of physical abuse as well as physical neglect, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. So physical abuse is the black eyes, the belt marks, the handprints, that kind of thing. And DYFS is concerned about protecting children under the age of 18, so minors in the home. Physical neglect, to me, is even more devastating in that neglect consists of never having your needs met. So oftentimes our children don't get the medical attention that they need. They may lack adequate housing. They usually are in need of appropriate clothing for the season, or the reality is that they do without, and they're often not fed properly. This has a reflection on poverty, but we're not just talking about lack of money here.
Okay.
So our kids oftentimes are struggling. And because of that, we get into emotional abuse, feeling just bad about themselves and having a low self-esteem. So emotional abuse, the third category, is devastating in that children feel unloved, unwanted. It's very, very difficult. And like I said, most of our children really come to us with a low self-esteem. And we know that the reality is, depending on how you feel about yourself, often impacts on how you feel in the future and what you're able to do and connect with other people and have meaningful relationships. The last category of sexual abuse, also devastating, high numbers of sexual abuse. The obvious situation is such that the caretaker of the child may sexually abuse them in one way or another, or expose them to some kind of material of a sexual nature. And we know from the history of DYFS that usually, if there's not an intervention of some sorts, the sexual abuse will continue. So you can see that we have our hands full with those four categories, and it's very difficult at times, but our main goal and the reason why we exist is to protect the children.
How do families become known to DYFS?
Well, unfortunately, we're always busy, It seems that anyone, in fact, can call us, and we have a main number out of Trenton, and that is 1-877-NJ-ABUSE. Anyone can call that number who has a concern for a child, and as I mentioned earlier, we're concerned with children under the age of 18, in that in New Jersey, once you're 18, you are considered an adult. The matters that concern DIFUS have also to do with the perpetration done by the caretaker of the child. So it's someone that lives in the home, someone who acts as a caretaker, a parent, another relative, a paramour, live-in situation in the home. And anyone can call us at that number, and they can report in a number of ways. They can report confidentially, not telling the screener their name, or they can give their name and ask that it be held in confidence. We can also accept calls that are anonymous. And we do this because we know that that's the best way to protect children. It encourages people to call if they're concerned, with not being fearful of any kind of retribution.
Okay, thank you. What happens after you receive a call? Can you give me an example? For an example, if someone out there is watching and there's an abuse situation going on in their family, and someone calls up anonymously, what's the process by which it goes through?
We always respond depending on the nature of the call, if it's an emergency or something very serious, certainly, and to the level of maybe just a family problem. We go out to wherever the child is. So the Trenton number contacts the county where the child resides. And as I did say earlier, we have to have at least one office in each county in New Jersey. Multi-offices in some of our more populated areas of Hudson and Passaic. But the reality is that anyone can call, and when we get the call, we respond to where the child is, be that at school, at home, the neighbors, at our relatives, and we start by interviewing the child. We ask the child if there's a concern that they're feeling, if they're in fact bruised or maltreated in some way. And then we believe also that if there are other children, minor children in the home, that any of the children can be victimized. So we actually not only interview the identified victim, but any other minor child. And after we're done interviewing the child, we interview the non-offending parent if there are two parents. We can then interview the perpetrator, the person accused of doing the crime, and we come up with an assessment. And there's a lot of protective service jargon. The question always is, what is the risk to the child? What is the family functioning assessment? And we really need to focus in to determine if the child is an imminent risk. And we come up with a plan and base our case action based on that.
So if a child happens to be watching the show today, and there's a situation, who should they tell? Who should they go to? Where they might be very nervous about, is anybody going to believe me? Especially if a parent is involved.
Yeah. We do believe children, and we certainly could take a call from anyone. We could take a call from the child themselves. But if the child was reluctant to do that, we would certainly ask that they contact someone that they trust, and that 800 number, 1-877-NJ-ABUSE, be called, and then the call will be patched into a person that's covering the area where that child lives. Now understand that DIFUS offices during the week have office hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. But given that child abuse is going on throughout 24/7, we do maintain 24-hour coverage. So that 877-NJ-ABUSE number, there are someone available, at least one person available in each county, in some cases more, 24 hours. So they can call at any time, and we will respond based on the need.
Sometimes do the police get involved as well, or do people call the police department and then you come out, or the other way around?
Yes, it happens all the time, unfortunately. We look to the police to assist us in some of our more serious matters, and the reality is that they often have accompanied us in situations where we would be in jeopardy. Oftentimes, they are very helpful. If there is not a need for the police intervention, we can go out, but we may first contact the police to see if their family is known to them. And so it is a back and forth kind of thing. They call us, we call them, we work together. We do this as a team to protect the children.
If it turns out that it's determined that there is a serious problem, do the children go into foster care? What's the criteria for them going into foster care?
Well, it's very sad, and I do have to say that DYFS chooses to keep the family together if at all possible. Our mandate is to protect the child. However, if the child is in jeopardy, we will remove them and put them in foster homes. That is not the first thing that we jump to do. If we can provide services where that's not necessary, we'll do that first. But yes, certainly, if the child is at risk of being abused or neglected, we place the child in foster care. And we hope to do that as a temporary measure so that the child can be reunited with the family. And we work along with the parents in order to improve things and to help their functioning so that the family can stay intact or be reunited. During foster care placement, we also maintain visitation between parents and children. So we do like to keep children together with their families if possible, and if we can't, we hope that it's a temporary measure to hopefully improve their functioning.
If the child is placed in foster care, do the parents go through what happens to the parents? In other words, if they eventually want to get their child back, what do they have to fulfill?
It's very individual, Lori. It depends case-by-case situation. I can tell you that what's very common, and it's no surprise, is that a lot of parents don't want to hurt their child or don't want to neglect their child, but they really need some education, or they need some parenting skills, or they're just under extreme stress at that point in time. Anyone can become abusive or neglectful based on the stress that in their lives are affecting them. People that lose their jobs, people that don't have financial means to provide for their families, people that may have substance or alcohol abuse. Addiction, unfortunately, is a high correlation with child abuse. And so we sometimes need to have the parents receive treatment in that area. And we always are reviewing the matter, and we're always visiting with the parents and working with them as we try also to evaluate their psychological needs as well as their parenting skills. So we're constantly providing services with the goal of reuniting the family.
Okay. When does DYFS actually close a case?
Well, we close a case when we feel comfortable that problems have been improved or the problems have been eliminated depending on the severity of the situation, and we need to feel comfortable that the child is not going to be a victim of abuse or neglect. Now, that's not to say that at some point we might get another call. And we work very closely with collateral services such as schools and doctors and welfare and mental health in order to help us make some of these difficult decisions. So we do that, we close the case when we feel comfortable knowing that in the future a situation could certainly be reported to us again.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, we'll be back in just a moment on Jefferson Highlights Community Television.
We're here today because, like you, we share a strong desire to do everything we can to help alleviate the terrible suffering caused by the recent tsunami disaster.
Millions of people have lost loved ones, including children, or homes, or in some cases hope. And though it happened on the other side of the world, it touches our hearts, and we want to help.
The greatest source of America's generosity is the good heart of the American people. And that's why we come to you not as presidents, but as two private citizens.
Everyone can help, and every dollar contributed will impact someone's life. You can trust that your contribution will be well spent.
Americans have shown time and again that when tragedy strikes, they respond.
So visit usafreedomcorps.gov to choose a reputable, authorized charity to accept your donations directly.
No one can change what happened.
But we can all change what happens next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back with Joanne Pierce from the Division of Youth and Family Services. Joanne, can you tell me tell me about your volunteer and internship program and what the volunteers do?
Well, there are people from the community that want to help us in some way or another, and they're referred to as community volunteers. We can recruit people who want to do whatever their area of interest is. We have people in the clerical unit who helps our clerical staff. We have volunteers from the community that want to work directly with our families. Some feel more comfortable working with our children and want to enrich the lives of the children in some way by perhaps taking them to activities or tutoring them or assisting them in their academics. We have some people who feel that their area of expertise is maybe in working with the parents and helping them manage their money and giving some nutritional kinds of guidelines or some parenting skills. So it's really very open. I feel comfortable that we have enough situations that any interest that the community has, we can match. So that's one part of the program, and they've just been wonderful. People from the community have just been so generous with their time. The second part of the program, if you want to look at it in that way, is what I call the student internship program. Now, truly, that is the majority of the program. We have student interns from every college in the state, and the reality is with students is that oftentimes, depending on their major, they can get college credit for interning. They don't necessarily do anything that different than the volunteers, but in fact, they do get the credit in their major. The most common majors that we have with us, given what we do, is psychology, social work, criminal justice. We have really been fortunate. The college kids are great to work with. They're very enthusiastic and committed and have all kinds of energy to assist us. We view them as aides to the caseworkers. So we have the caseworkers who have done the investigation, and now we need to come up with what plans the family could benefit from. And the interns can assist the caseworkers in meeting those needs. They could take them to an appointment that they need to go to. They can register them for welfare. They can take them to parenting skills class. Whatever it is that the family needs, we try to address. But the interns are assistants to the caseworkers.
What are the age requirements, especially for students that want to become interns? Are there age requirements for that?
Well, because in New Jersey at 18 you're an adult, we do have most interns beyond that age. That's not to say that we don't have minor high school students, for an example, doing some volunteer work. They can assemble packets and they can do that kind of thing. But you really need to be an adult to be able to have interaction with our families. We think that that's best. And the reality also is that we like people to be able to drive and have their license because we're line staff oriented and we go out into the field. We don't really stay in the office all that much.
So if somebody watching the show wanted to become a volunteer, who would they contact? How do they go about it?
Me. I coordinate the northern area of the state, and I can be reached in the Newton office at 1-800-392-2654 at extension 208. And I would be happy to hear from anyone who has an interest. We could set up a meeting and I could go through more details in terms of what you'd be doing in DIFA's background, and you could see if it's what you're really interested in.
Okay, that's great. You were talking about the differences between a volunteer and an intern. An intern, is it assigned through the school?
Yes.
Can you explain on that a little bit?
Well, I go throughout the state to all the colleges, and I have a relationship usually with people from the career services or from the department of their major, psychology, political science, criminal justice. And actually I go and speak at the colleges. And so they know about DIFAS and they know what assistance we're looking for, and then they can be matched.
Okay, and how often and how long do you need to intern?
Well, if you're an intern who has a social work major, that usually is the most extensive of the programs. Social work majors usually volunteer with us 2 days a week for 2 semesters. And then we have some people who just have a 100-hour requirement from their political science department or whatever. And what we have found that works best is that interns and volunteers at least give us a good part of 1 day a week. That's really the minimum that we're looking for. It is a bureaucracy. Our families are somewhat complicated. It's not the kind of thing that you can just come in for an hour or 2 and leave. It doesn't usually work like that. So if you have a good part of 1 day a week, that's most helpful for both you, consistency-wise, as well as our families.
Okay, and what happens once somebody finishes their internship?
Well, we've been very fortunate, and the perfect scenario is that we get to hire our interns. You really get to know and feel firsthand if you're interested in staying with us. And we're certainly thrilled to have these interns continuing on with us. They've been cleared. They know what we're all about. They've begun having relationships in the office as well as with our communities. So it's the perfect scenario for everyone.
What types of positions would they be taking?
Everyone enters DIFAS by starting the entry-level position, which is really referred to as a family service specialist trainee. So within 4 months of getting a 4-year degree, you can apply for DIFAS.
Okay, and if you were not a volunteer or an intern and you were interested in getting a job at DIFAS, how would you go about that?
It's most easiest to submit a resume indicating a cover letter where you would like to work and submitting it to the personnel office in the area that you wish to go to. In the northern area, the address is 100 Hamilton Plaza in Patterson, and the zip is 07505. And the cover letter, you would indicate which office specifically you might want to be considered for. Or what we found too is some people maybe are open to whatever is available. Once we get your information, we do respond based on the receipt of that information, and you're contacted further when an opening comes up in the office that you're looking for.
Okay, and what are some of the resources that DIFAS is looking for?
Well, we need people who are assertive to a certain extent. It's a tough job. It's not for everybody. Usually people are motivated by helping the children and the families. So you have the compassion and you have the empathy. We do provide training. So there is extensive protective service training in your first year and ongoing with DIFAS. We like people who can communicate effectively. I mentioned the driving is important, and we're also sometimes looking for bilingual people, so that's another plus.
Okay, and can you tell me how, I know you handle northwestern New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
How does that fit in, how do you fit in with the rest of New Jersey's DIFAS programs? What's the structure of it?
Well, the head of DIFAS, so to speak, is at Trenton, and the director of DIFAS and a lot of the money and the policy making happens in Trenton, and then it filters down, and there are area offices dividing up the state. I cover the northern area, there's a southern area as well.
Okay, and do you feel that the state laws regarding children are strong enough, or do they need to be changed in order to protect the children?
I think sometimes that people think that DIFAS has a lot of authority, and in reality, I don't know that we have as much authority as sometimes people think, but any time that the law is written, and we function under Title IX and Title 30, you have to realize that the law is written to protect that minor child, or is written on their behalf. So the authority that we do have to do the investigations and to follow up on calls that we get really come from Title IX and Title 30.
I know sometimes you'll see on TV shows about a child that was in foster care, you know, under the direction of DIFAS, where maybe there was a problem and DIFAS gets blamed. Is that because there's such an overload of cases for the people that are handling them? And what's your feeling on that and how that can all work better?
Well, we're certainly not a perfect system. State government is going right through now a major reform. I think that the reality is that we have been inundated with a number of cases, and so right now the reform has involved increasing the number of caseworkers that have the number of families that we have. Not having as many cases certainly is helpful. Having more money to provide services to the families that are in need. Having more cars, an upgraded computer system. All these kinds of things impact. And I think over the next year and a half, 2 years, we're going to see major reform. And it's going to be much easier to accomplish some of the tasks that we set forth. We're very busy. Child abuse is really a social problem, and unfortunately we have been busy, and we're hoping that in the long run things will improve.
Does DIFAS take donations from private citizens, or is it strictly state supported?
We are a state agency. I think you're going to find a lot more positive advertising and recruitment. We do need to look to the community to help us. This is not only a DIFAS problem. Child abuse crosses all socioeconomic, racial, ethnic bounds, and we look to the community to partner with us to assist some of these families. And I think you're going to find that there'll be a lot more recruiting and a lot more interaction in the community.
Very good. Would you go ahead and give us the phone numbers for more information on
Yes.
your programs?
We're always recruiting. So once again, in order to reach me, it's 1-800-392-2654 at extension 208. If you're interested in providing foster care, it's 1-877-NJ-FOSTER. Or if you're interested in adopting children from us, it's 1-877-NJ-ADOPT.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure, and hopefully you'll get some phone calls.
Good.
And thank you for watching Jefferson Highlights Community Television. I'm Lori Zook.